Hello everyone and welcome to the final episode of Google Sheets tutorial brought to you by Uplatz. Today we'll be talking about pivot tables and how you can use pivot tables to summarize your data sets into certain different formats of rows, columns, and the values coming out of them. So generally when we work with data, it's a huge set of data. The data that I'm using right now is not big enough, but when you're working in real time, you'll find data which is of multiple columns and thousands of entry. So what's the best way to actually come up with a new way or an approach summarized way of looking into the data? So what we see on our screen right now is the order data for the different dates that we have and the region. So we have four regions. So what we'll do here is we'll just try to filter this. So what I'll try to do is I'll put my cursor on B2, use the control shift and the right arrow. I'll select all my columns. If you see, all my columns are now selected, and I'll just click a filter here. So you see that everything between or under the rows, the row I've selected for the columns here would get highlighted, and that means that every data which is there till the break of the data points gets selected into the filter. So in this way, I can go ahead and see that I can see the region. So I just want to show you a difference here before I move ahead. If I unfilter this and I keep my cursor anywhere on the table, which is not, so if you see, I have missed out on the first row and the first column, and my data starts from B2. So if I just click on A1 and click on filter, you would notice that my filters does not apply on the table. So just look at this. So Google Sheets is not able to identify where my table starts from, and it's not able to find the filter to be applied to the table. So in such scenarios, what you have to do is select the headers and then go ahead and create a filter. There you go, pretty easy. What we'll do right now is I'll show you the walkthrough of the data, and then we'll go ahead and see how we can use pivot tables to summarize or get some meaningful summary of the data that we have here. So we have different order dates, with the order date starting from the 6th of January 2018 to 21st of December 2019. So that's like 2 years of data. And then we have three different regions: Central, East, and the West of orders. And then we have representatives: Andrews, Jill, Howard, and so on. And we have the pencil or the items that they have been selling. So this is basically sales data done by different reps from different regions, and the amount, the units they have sold, and the unit cost. So the cost of one unit of pencil costs around $1.99, and the total that we see here is the total amount that they have spent. So what we'll do right now is first we'll try to format the data. So we have the dates in the format of MMDDYY, and then we have all of these in the text format, and then we have units in numeric format. But the unit cost and the total cost are not formatted. So what we'll do is just assign them a format here, which is currency. Let's do currency rounded. But you see that they had certain decimals, so let's just do currency. So you'd see that the numbers now have the dollar sign, so you basically know what's the currency that we're using. Since we are working in the UK, let's go ahead and use pounds. There you go. So what we'll do is we'll select the data. So basically we'll just select all the data points that you have and try to create a pivot table out of this. So the pivot table option lies under data, and then you have pivot table. So this shows you the data range, so you can select or move the data range from here. So it says on four pivot tables, which is the name of the sheet, four pivot tables, sales order. So whenever you select the sheet, it's under columns, sorry, it's under inverted commas, and then you have exclamation mark, and then you have the range that you want to look at. So it's from B2 to H45, B2 to H45. You can also click here and change the data range, but then that's the range I actually want. Now you have two options. You can either create the pivot table in a new sheet, or you can create that on the existing sheet. So I'll just try to create that in the new sheet right now. And you see that it changes into pivot table 2. So this means that there was another pivot table that was created, and the automating nomenclature started with pivot table 2 instead of pivot table 1. Okay, so what do we see here? So you have two options. So you have this option, which is your workspace to create a pivot table, and then you have on the right the pivot table editor. So you see the range is for pivot table sales order B2 to H45. You can always change the range from here. What is the best practice to use? If you know that there can be an append of data which can be done later and you want the pivot table to modify accordingly, what you can do is just increase the range here to maybe H1000. So any data that gets appended over here, it'll get automatically added to your data set or your pivot table for that matter. So I just increase it to H1000. Now, there are some suggested outcomes that we are looking at. So it says average of units for each representative. What does that mean? So I want to find the average of units sold by each representative, and that can be given. So just a kind of suggestion given by Google Sheets by its understanding of the data. So if you click on that, you'll see that all the representatives and their averages are visible. So let's just trying to verify this number. So Andrews, it says that Andrews have sold 45.75 as an average of units. So let's have a look here. Let's go and select Andrews here. And let's see the number of units this person has sent. So he has, I'm assuming he's a he. And then the person has an average of 45.75. So that's the actual number. That's one summary that you can create. And then I'll just cancel this and just look at some other suggested items. So you have sum of total for each item. Let's see what this does. So it gets me all the items and the sum of total value that they have. So the total value is 19,627.88 pounds. So let's go ahead and see that. So I'll just remove the filter here, or I'll just try to unfilter from here and just go ahead and see the sum. There you go. Get the sum. That's the sum. And there are a few other options, so few other suggested items. Now, let's see what are the different, we just not use the third option. So it's basically average of units. It's just going to give you some values, so like central, west, and east, and that's the average of units. But these are the suggested items. What else can you do from here? So a pivot table generally has three things. One, you have the rows. Two, you have the columns. And three, you have the values between the rows and the columns. Either in a so there are different aggregation methods that you can use between the rows and the columns for the values that you have. Let's see what we're talking about. So you have rows, and then you have the add column, columns add, values add, and filters add. For example, let's revisit our data. What if I want to see who is the highest bidder from, or the highest selling rep from the central region, or all regions combined? So what I'll do here is I'll just add the representative here, and you get the name of all the representatives. And then I'll just add region over here. And then on the values, what I'll do is I'll do a total. There you go. So you see there is no duplicate. Everyone is spending in their own region. So what I can do is, if I just want the highest spending, I can just do this. And yeah, there you go. You know that parent has been selling the most amount. And what you can do is you can summarize it by descending. It doesn't really matter actually. So you can just know that parent has been spending the most amount here. So you see that parent is a person who has actually not spent, but rather brought in the most money for the company. So he's the representative who is the highest, or the biggest salesman. So what are the options we will look at? So when you look at rows, you can add a row, you can add multiple rows, as many as you want. So you can just add to the region, so I know which person is belonging to which region. But every time you add something, you see that there are certain elements to it. So how do you want to order the representatives? Do you want to order them ascending? Do you want to order them descending? Or you can order them by sum of total as well. So this is how you can get the top supplier. So what I can do here is I can do, okay, it was not parent, I was wrong. So it's actually Kivel. So Kivel is the highest or the best salesman of the year. So what you can do is you can order the representatives in the descending order of sum of total. So you see that 3,109 out of 1962 7.88 is actually the highest one of the representative salesman. What you see is here is you can see totals. So I can remove the totals from here, or I can add the totals back. Now, why do we need to remove or hide the total? I'll just get back to that later. So when you see columns, I've not added any columns here, but values, when you see, you want to summarize them as sum of everything. So this is the sum of everything that is sold, which makes sense. But what if I say who was the salesman who made the highest order on one particular day? So what I'll do here is I'll do max. So you see that in that case, Jardin has made the highest order here, which is 1879. Let's and there are other things that you can see. So who has done the most unique number of orders? So you can do a count A, that's Jones, and then you have count unique, average, max, min, even median and product, standard deviation, variance, everything. So you can choose how do you want the aggregation for your values to be. And the option that I was actually saying when of show totals, which becomes not very handy, is when you actually go ahead. So I'll just change this to sum, and I'll change this to show as percentage of grand total. So in that case, you actually don't need the percentage of grand total because your grand total becomes 100%. So I don't need the show total. So I'll just remove them. So it becomes visually appealable and visually appealing, sorry. And what happens here is you see that 15.8%, which is close to 16% of the sales, or 32% of the sales. So if I take the top three, they have made more than or close to 50% or half of the sales. So these three are the top performers, while the rest eight people have been contributing to the other 50%. So this is where you get a good insight from your data, which is really handy because looking at this, I don't know who has sold how much because of the number of dates and the variance or the correlation that is not visible here. Sorry, let's go back. Okay, so yeah, so this is how pivot table can be really, really useful. For example, I want to see whether I've seen this at the rep level. I can also see this at the um, let's say region level. So I want to see it at the region level. So what I'll do here is I'll just remove the rep and see that the central region has made more than close to 57% of the sales. Now, how can you make this a little more complicated? So I want to see by the region and by the rep. You see now there are different things that come up. So you have repeat low row labels and you have show totals, right? So I can remove the show totals from here and I can remove the show totals from here. So you see the total for central and the east is gone when you remove this. So when you do this, you can see either subtotals here or you can choose not to see them. And you can repeat these row labels on these blank spaces. So you can just click here and repeat the row labels. So this is how you can play around with the different pivot tables that you have. Add more rows and probably add more columns. So you can add more columns here. First of all, I'll just change this to default. So the basic idea of a pivot table is actually to get a very nice summary of how you want to look at the data and what kind of aggregation you want, whether you want the appearance to be in a certain format of repeating row labels or showing totals, or whether you want the values to be in a percentage of row, percentage of call, percentage of grand total. So let's see how we can use that. So Where is the region here? I'll just add the reps here, and or maybe let's okay, let's add the items here on the columns. Let's add the reps here. So now if you see the data, you have the different regions, the different representatives from these regions, and you have the different items here and the grand totals. So what I can do is, if I want to see, let's say who sold the highest number of pens. So what I can, you can also move these somewhat like this. Let me actually move something. So what I'll do is I'll move the reps to columns, and I will remove the items and put the items here on the rows and remove region. There you go. So I want to see who sold the highest binder. Okay. So what I'll do is I will show the sum as percentage of, I think I did something wrong. Percentage of row. I'm sorry. If I do percentage of row, all of these becomes 100%, right? So if you see here, who sold the highest binder? It's Jordan. So the most binders, or the most the highest value of the sell of binders was done by Jordan. And let's see for pens. So for pens, it was 28% for Jones. So you can also change this. These are interchangeable. So you can move the representatives to rows and move the items to columns. Sorry, move the items to column. And you see, um, this actually becomes percentage of column. There you go. So you can see that in a better view now. So you know Jordan sold the highest here. And what I can do is I can represent this in the ascending order sum of total. Okay, so I can choose any one of them, either the grand total, or I can choose like I want to see in the list of binders. So you can see Jordan was the highest. I can keep this changing and see who's for desk. Desk for Sorvino, and who was for pen. Let's see. Pen was Jones. So you see how how easy it becomes to answer certain questions which you were probably not able to answer using the raw data in the first place, but you can easily answer them in terms of pen set, in terms of pivot table. So it becomes really easy to answer summary questions coming out of the data, and you can have a very nice summary with a lot of modifications that you want in the data. So if you see grand total, you see Kival again as our top salesman. Is probably gonna get awarded for that. So the fourth option, which we probably didn't talk about in the meeting or in the last session today, is filters. How does filters help? So for example, I don't want to know how much was spent, okay, and I just want to remove it. So I can just add a filter here, and I can put an item that, can you please remove pen for me, and then tell me the total. There you go. Kivel is still the highest, but um, yeah, you can change. For example, Kivel has sold most of the desk and the pen set. So what if in certain scenario there was no desk and pen set? Let's see. See, Ezekiel is no longer the highest salesman, so the best salesman. So it's now Jordan. So you can apply filters to understand or remove certain parts of the data set which you think is not to be taken into account or is to be removed as part of the final summary table. So this becomes really handy in data sets where you have multi variables, and there are certain variables that you want to remove as part of the summary, and then you can use filters. It's really handy. So That's when you can apply multiple filters, just not one. For example, I want to remove Kivel and I want to remove the selling of binders. So what I can do, I can remove binder, I can add another filter. Let's say I want to remove, I just want order date greater than, let's say date is after, um, let's say exact date 01 dash 01 dash 201, and I hope it takes this format. And let's see. Yeah, there you go. So these are all the sales that has happened in 2019, and based on that, Kivel is still the highest person here. So all there are most employees that are gone. There's some employees that are gone because we had, I think, 11 employees, 11 representatives, and now we are down to 8. So these are my representatives who made sales only in 2018. So this is where, and then you can apply more and more filters and create, uh, for example, I just want people who have sold in 2019 and people who have not sold a binder, and people who are from the central region, and I want the sum to be default. I want to know what is the total of their sales. So there you go, you know now that it's 2794, and I think the total sales was close to 20,000. So that's just close to 17% of the total, 14% of the total sales. So this is how you can use pivot tables. Uh, that we can come up with more examples around. I can remove this total to make it more visually appealing. So there you go. You can add the first total here. So this is how you can use pivot tables. And what I generally do is pivot tables are, you can also change the color of it and you can make it more visually appealing. And there you go. You can make it more visually appealing to the entire audience. But what I generally tend to do is I use this pivot table as it is and create a copy of that where it links to the original pivot table. So you can just link back to the original pivot table. Sorry, and you can just do a control R, which is um, extending the data from the left to the right, and a control D to the extending the data to the down and the bottom. So I generally do that to represent the data in a certain format. And because I don't feel that pivot table is a good way to represent the data, and it's just easy, it's better to, it's visually more appealing when you do it outside the pivot tables. So yeah, that's it from the session from today. Feel free to drop any questions or comments that you have, and we would be happy to resolve any of those questions that you might have. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.